Hello and welcome to From Our Perspective, two therapists, moms, and a mic. I'm Claudia Glassman.
And I'm Katie Truax.
We are. Hi.
Hi, happy Memorial Day.
Yes, you too. You too. We were just working. That's what we're doing. I am
Yeah,
actually working today because I have to.
I'm not. I am off. We have been exercising and laundrying, and we have some friends coming over to grill this afternoon, kind of like a late lunch, early dinner type thing.
Yeah.
So hence my even more casual than normal appearance.
Yeah. Well, I am also, I think Aura's a little bit casual, but I am also more casual because I went to the gym this morning and did the Memorial Day Murph workout. And then I grabbed a
Okay,
quick.
what's Memorial Day Murph workout?
Oh, it's like a CrossFit workout. It's run a mile, do 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 squats, run a mile. And it's named
Hey,
after,
you can do that shit?
huh?
You can do all that?
I've done it like every year since like 2010.
Okay, say the numbers again.
A mile, run a mile,
Yeah, everybody can do. I mean, I can't do that, but
100 pull-ups,
that's
200,
something that not everybody can do.
200 push-ups, 300 squats, and then run a mile.
That's some crazy shit, man.
Yeah, we do it every Memorial Day at the gym to honor Murph, who it's named after, who died in action, in active duty, on active duty. I don't know how to say that. And so it's like one of the hero workouts, and they do it every Memorial Day, usually across CrossFit gyms and stuff. So yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So every year.
I can't do like any pull-ups.
Well, so you can change it,
Okay.
right? So
What could I do instead?
like you can do like pull-ups with like a band on your feet to do it, or I have shoulder issues recently, so I did not do all pull-ups. I did ring rows and pull-up combinations, so I wasn't tearing out my shoulder on all that repetition. So you can like modify it in different ways. You can do
It's a
half
lot,
of
man.
it. So some people only did half of a Murph. So they cut everything in half and just did half of that. But we also spend, so at my gym, we spend about the last month and a half or so every Monday doing prep for that workout. So every Monday was some form of push-ups, pull-ups, whatever, running. So you prep for it. So you don't just like go in and do it. But
Jeez Louise.
yeah,
Well,
but it's like they do a barbecue after and like they grill and it's like a big, event.
that's pretty cool though.
Yeah.
Well,
But
I walked for an hour in the Florida humidity and came home and ate cottage cheese and berries and folded laundry.
oh, that
That
sounds fun. I did laundry yesterday. Yeah, it's, sometime, and I'm working later today after this because I have to get some clients in this week. So that's, yeah. So today, what are we talking about? We're talking about, okay, I'm going to butcher this because I've already tried when we were talking before we got online. Adult child parent dynamics. Did I say that right?
Yeah, well, it's hard to wrap your mind around, right? But when we think of parenting, we often think of like minor children, right? But we don't stop being parents when our children are of age, right? So, like, one of the things that's fascinating to me, I was telling a client this last week. They say that clients kind of gravitate toward therapists they perceive to be like them in some way, right? And one of those dynamics is age. And so I'm in my 40s. And so I have clients who are in their 30s, right? 20s and 30s who may look at me and say, oh, she's close in age to me, as opposed to, let's say, a therapist who might be like in her 60s or 70s. And then I have clients who are, 40s, 50s. I even have a client in her 60s who, may look at me and say, oh, well, she's close enough in age to, kind of be somebody like me, right? And not that this is a conscious process, it may for some, but I think for more, it's probably just subconscious, right? And so I see this really interesting experience where young adults are talking about their relationships with their parents, and older adults are talking about their relationship with their now adult children, right?
Mm,
And I obviously, or not obviously, don't have any clients that are related to one another, although that could happen for a therapist, right? Especially someone who takes a more family systems approach. But I often like feel like I wish I could bridge this gap for you people, right? And I kind of try to the best of my ability to, ask the right questions and offer perspective. But it's really interesting hearing each of their very different experiences of one another, right?
mm, yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I have clients that are, I mean, I think they're like in our demographic, but a little bit older, had kids younger than I did, right? So they've got young adult children, like early 20s, mid 20s, and then aging parents. And they are very much in the middle of like having to take care of their parents and phasing out adult children. But like, again, right, you're not really done. And it's this really weird, it's like a lot of transitions, right? Of transitioning out of that more intensive, active, involved parenting role as your child becomes more adult and independent, but then becoming more of a parent to your parent who, for health issues or, yeah, I've got in recent years, a large number of clients who are struggling with parents and dementia, which is interesting because
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's the age, maybe that's where we're at in life, but I have increasingly seen that as one of the reasons people are seeking support, kind of struggling with that. And it's not really like a thing it's not like my specialty of like, parents with dementia, but I'm seeing an increase in that too. And maybe that has to do with like our age and the age of our parents and aging in general. Um, but right, that dynamic of now you are your parents' caretaker
Yeah.
in a way that you were not historically.
Right. And it's interesting because, we don't talk a lot about the topics you and I've just approached today, right? There are a ton of parenting forums, right? Like you can go on Facebook, or I don't know where are there forums these days. I mean, even things locally, right? Like your community centers or your libraries, right? Schools, preschools have parenting groups. There's, churches like Mother's Day out type experiences, right? Um, Books and books and books written on parenting techniques for like little children. But again, we don't talk about these parent child dynamics past a certain time. I don't know if this is just that we're tired by that time. We're like, man, it's just always going to be difficult. There's just challenges that come, right? No matter what age or stage you are. And I do think there is some of that. I think that, maybe this is just being jaded. I don't think it is. I think this is a true observation, both in myself, but also in my clients, where, you know, new parents are typically somewhere in their 20s or 30s, right? And that is hard. That is a very hard thing to learn to do, is like become a mom or dad, right? And be responsible for somebody else's life. It changes your relationship with your partner or your spouse. It changes all of the way you identify yourself in the world. There's all of a sudden somebody else that is more important than you, and maybe multiple of them, right? And everything shifts. And I think that it's kind of this like, whoa, huge life kind of like rite of passage, right? This amazing thing that people have to navigate. And I love that there's so much support for that out there. But as we move through life, the challenges don't get any easier, right? Our children face different milestones that are difficult, right? They just become more self-sufficient, whether it's puberty, social issues, academic issues, going off to college or not, deciding on careers, finding partners or not, right? Some
Yeah.
get married, some have children of their own. And then by that time, we are starting to have other things happening in our life, right? Like some people struggle with empty nesting, some people struggle with aging parents, right? Some people struggle with kind of this attachment loss. And that's a big theme that comes up in my work with my clients. And, you know, I try to kind of shed light on these dynamics as attachment loss or attachment cries, right? So, particularly, I was thinking this week, I have a client who she's in her late 20s, and we can just assume, I don't know how old her mother is, but we would assume that her mother would be somewhere, oh gosh, what, 50s or 60s, right? And her mother lives out of state and comes to visit fairly frequently. And it doesn't sound like her mother really knows much about how to identify her feelings, verbalize her feelings, or ask for what she's needing or wanting from her daughter in a way that is received well, right? And it comes across as some passive aggressive comments, sometimes some aggressive comments, but it feels like underneath it all is an attachment cry, right? Where the mother in her 50s or 60s is longing for this connection with her daughter, but she just doesn't do it right, right?
Mhm.
And I don't think she knows how to do it, right? So
Right.
here I am, I'm sitting with the daughter and hearing, these like sordid tales of like, oh, this is what mom said to me this week, and this is what she did, and these are the comments she made, and this was the tone, and all this stuff that makes it so hard
Mm.
20 something client to want to come closer to her mother. It makes her want to like back away, right? Like, my God, this is such a, it's so off putting, right? I don't want to be spoken to this way. I don't want for my family gathering to be colored by this energy of like the aggression or the passive aggression, right? But I hear in everything, the mom just wants to be close.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of stories around that. I think though there's certain events, right, that kind of highlight that. So like oftentimes when people get married, it is not uncommon for a parent to make it difficult, whether they get overly controlling, right? Or they start to feel threatened or they get a little passive aggressive. It's because they're struggling with that transition, right? That moments like that, right? Like where you get married, where you have your own children are like very they highlight your evolution
Yeah.
into adulthood in a little bit of a different way. And I hear, especially those moments, a lot of people respond to, you know, one of their parents, both of their parents, a parent is really struggling with that and making things very difficult for them from the adult child's perspective, right? And I agree with you. I kind of look at that and I'm like, yeah, because they don't know how to redefine this, right? There is a fear. There's a fear of you don't need me
That's right.
and you're moving on. And as a parent, like, I'm not there yet, but I'm very well aware that my role is to raise independent, well, like highly functioning adults as best as I can. The double-edged sword of that is those are going to be highly independent adults that don't need me in the same way, and depending on how many children you've had, right? For some people, it's 30 years of like being that person, and then you're just supposed to stop.
Right.
And where I think the struggle is like, right, as us, as the parents who are going to have adult children one day or who do have adult children, like we really need to lean into the opportunity to redefine ourselves again and also transition. And that's easier said than done.
It is.
But I think if we don't do that, right, if we don't say, okay, what can I do for me to fill myself back up now that my parenting role will be different, right? How do I build connection with the person who doesn't live in my house anymore and I just don't see for dinner all the time?
Right.
And I see some people really rock at that. Like some people do a really good job of that transition. I work with a lot of clients. Not all of them have struggles with parents. Some of them have really positive, close relationships that they were able to kind of transition through all of this. And then you know, also quite a few who don't have that for various reasons, right? Um, but yeah, it's really no one prepares you for that. There's no book on that, right? There's no
No.
book on, I have a lot of friends who have older parents and have had to start taking care of their parents' health and well-being, or, make some tough decisions. And there's no support or guideline or book to read on how do I navigate this, right? So I think you're right. We focus so much on the littles. We don't really think about those big transitions.
Well, I think one of the things, the reasons why, one of the many reasons why, right? I do think we get tired as we age, and I think that um I think it's largely centered around loss,
Mm,
right? And that's something that we podcasted on this, gosh, a few months back, right? Our culture does not do a good job at naming and being present in loss, right?
mm,
It's not a party topic, right? It's not a party topic of, well, how are you feeling these days with the fact that your children are pulling away? Right? Yeah. We struggle. We talk to each other about tantruming or sleep training or kindergarten, or are they speaking? Are they crawling? Are they pottying? Right? Like, but we don't talk about like that feeling of that bittersweet feeling of, wow, I'm so proud of my child, but I feel lonely sometimes, or I feel sad sometimes because he would rather be out with his friends than be hanging with me on a Friday night, right? And it's like you're so grateful that you have a child who's social and engaged and active and able to do those things, right? But at the same time, it's a loss, right?
mm.
And then the loss continues as they do more things that we're so proud of, right? They go to college or move away and get their own place, or they get married, right? And I've had a lot of clients say, my husband now is or my wife now is my family, my primary family, right? And yes, that is, I think most people, not everybody, but I think most people would agree that that's kind of how it should be, right? But um, for the family of origin, it's a huge loss because, like you said, for at least 18 years, you are a little unit, and
Mm,
then all of a sudden one of your people, the people that you like have poured your heart and soul and spirit into for 18 years plus 9 months, right? All of a sudden says, oh, you know what, I'm gonna go over here, my friends are more important than you, or I'm gonna go over here now in my 20s or 30s and my spouse is more important than you, and I'm gonna have
mm,
children of my own, and I'm gonna set boundaries with you around how you can be with my children and when you can come visit and whether you can be in the room when I give birth and how you can hold my children, right? Like I have one client, she and her parents really, really have constant strife over how the grandparents hold and touch the infant, or like her
mm,
baby, right? I mean, it's just one milestone after another, and it feels very much from what I've seen, and I'd be curious to get your take on this. Like it becomes conditional, right? For the younger of the two in the relationship. So the child, the adult child, is kind of like, well, this is how it's going to be. If you want to be in my world, this is how you have to be, right? You have to respect my boundaries. You have to respect my choice of partner. You have to respect my lifestyle. You have to respect my parenting. You have to treat my children the way I want you to treat them. You have to treat my spouse the way I want you to treat them. You have to do things the way I want them to be done on my holidays, which makes sense, right? If you hear that in isolation, like, okay, good boundaries, right? It seems like healthy self care, right? And healthy ways
mm.
to kind of protect your family values. But then from the other side, if you think about that from like our side, Claudia, like you and me, as our girls grow up and they start saying that to us, we're going to be so happy that they're able to do that and set those boundaries. But then it's like, wait a minute, for 18 plus years, I was the one telling you this is how it's going to be in my house, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, no, 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 mom, if you want to come to my house, this is how it's got to be, right? It's like, whoa,
Yeah,
everything shifts.
yeah. But do you think, because I definitely know scenarios that are like you described, right? These are my boundaries, these are my rules. And then I know people that seem to have, um, maybe it's similarities in, they almost, just recreate what they had at home in their own family unit. So that doesn't seem to be as big of a divide
Mhm.
between what they're creating and what their parents had created. And there's a little bit more mixing and blending and maybe fewer rigid boundaries.
Mhm.
So what are your thoughts on why some people take one path and some people take another? Because for me, I think everything comes down to the foundation we have with our kids,
Yeah.
right? Those
I
little
hope.
babies are going to grow up to be 30-year-old married people, right? Or independent in whatever way they choose to be. Um, is there something like, how do we, right, foster ongoing connection and kindness towards one another?
Mhm.
Um, and I
I
don't know, it might be personalities, right? It could be the parent being flexible, being able to bend and accommodate with the ever-changing development of their children. So, but when they hit adulthood, they're accepting of it. So maybe the boundaries don't need to be so rigid because they can let go enough to let
Yeah.
their person be. I think the rigid boundaries come from when the adult child feels intruded upon or
Mhm.
not respected for their viewpoint, right?
Yeah.
Um, like if you as a kid were always told this is how it's going to have to be and you have no space for your own opinion, I can see where you grow up to be a 30-something-year-old with some really rigid boundaries for your parent around, no, now I'm doing it my way, right? Because it's a little bit of a control and power dynamic. Um, but I do think there's ways to enter it more. I still think it's difficult because there's a lot you have to manage within yourself and come to terms with. But I do think there's ways to do it where it feels good to the people involved.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
I'm still hopeful. I mean, I make my child like pinky promise every day that we're going to be besties forever. So, I mean, I'm sure that's going to hold, right?
yeah. I mean, Kenzie wanted me to go to college with her. She's like, "Can you go back to college?" I'm like, I could if I wanted to get like a new major or like whatever, another degree. She's like, "Oh, so you can come with me?" I'm like, I'm pretty
Oh, that'd be
sure.
so cute.
Like, you can be
Do
my roommate. I'm like, you couldn't pay me to live in the dorms again as a like, at that point I'll be like 50 something years old. Like, no. I was like, I don't think you're gonna want me to come with you, but like I love that you want me to come with you right now. I should get that in
so
writing and show up to college, be like, I'm moving in. Um,
funny. No, I think you're right. I think my stepmom has done an amazing job at this. I look at her and I want to model so much after the way she has parented my sister and the relationship they've had throughout the decades. They've been close. They've been through a lot as a family, and they have stayed close. And they're both very kind of like strong-willed and independent, but also at the same time easygoing, if that makes any sense. Like they both can kind of ebb and flow into like each other, like what do you need? What do I need? Oh, you need rest, you need to be together. What are we doing here? It's fine. Anything kind of is can go, if that makes sense. And
mhm.
I think to your point, right, that it's almost like the opposite of rigid boundaries, but yet, you know, they're still able to kind of say, "Oh, I need to retreat, or I need to rest, we need to go to bed, or let's call it a night, or something like that," right? To take care of themselves. But at the same time, it's very flexible the way they are, and they spend a lot of time around each other. My stepmom helps my sister a lot with her. She has three kiddos, and they're still pretty young. I want to say Zoe just turned 2 and Alice is 7 or 8. And then Jack is somewhere in the middle. So all three are under 10. And so they're very close. They see each other a lot and they spend a lot of time together. But I do think you're right that it is that that flexibility of being. And my stepmom, one of the things I love the most about her is she is just full of unconditional positives. It's kind of like everything is wonderful.
Mm.
Everything about you is wonderful. I love everything about you. Whatever decisions you make are going to be wonderful, and I support you no matter what you do. And that's a really rare trait, I think.
Yeah, but think about how much freedom that allows to be who you want to be as an adult. Whatever you want to do, I think you'll do great. However you're going to parent, I think it'll be just right. That's I think that fosters that faith, right, in someone's ability, in your child's ability to be, a good adult and good at what they do, whatever that might be. Um, I think that fosters that closeness. Cause yeah, I would want you in my life too. If you were like, everything you do is going to be fine. And I love watching you. My mother-in-law was very much like that. Even when I thought like, I'm doing a crappy job right now, she'd be like, I wish I knew what you guys know when I was your age. And you guys are fantastic at this, that, and the other. Like it was almost like, like we couldn't screw stuff up. But you
Yeah.
want someone like that supporting you because you're also more willing to take feedback from someone like that. So when that person pulls you aside and says, "Hey, like I have an idea," you're like, "Okay," because they think they don't criticize me. They're not
Right.
judging me. So whatever feedback you have feels very pure and authentic, not judgy and critical,
Mhm.
right? And I think what we have to remember that as our kids adult, they
Mhm.
do feel like they don't always know what they're doing, but they don't necessarily want you to tell them that they don't know what they're doing. You know what I mean? Like we all have insecure moments where like, am I doing the right thing? Am I parenting right? Am I married? Am I in the right relationship? Do I have the right job? Like, did I screw something up? We always ponder that, right? But you don't want someone in your life being like, did you screw it up? Like you want someone to support you, you know?
Right.
And you want someone to give you the freedom to make those decisions and figure it out. Right.
Mhm.
And I do think if we can find a way to give our kids space, they will more want to connect with us.
Mhm.
Right.
And that's so hard, right? Because again, they're our hearts. Like they're like part of us, right? Like, oh my God, the thought of losing our children, like to anything, even good things, right? Like these things we're talking about today, these milestones, right? These like, I'm going off to college, mom, right? Or I'm going to get married, or I'm moving here with my spouse, right? Or I'm going to diverge from the way you've raised me and choose to live my life in a lifestyle that is not at all what you would have chosen for me,
Yeah.
right? Like that's a huge one I've seen
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
And it's like this, okay, go fly, be you, but I still love you. I still want to be with you. And those lines of connection start to feel very tenuous, right?
Mm.
To
Hmm.
approve of. And then I have clients sometimes where they do this thing and they have these entire conversations in their own minds or in my office and don't bring the other in,
Yeah.
right? So they make these assumptions that I have to pull back because mom would never approve,
Mm. Hmm.
right? And then I'm over here in the sandwich generation, right? Feeling this feeling of, oh my God, I hope my daughter never does that. And I do things like come home at the end of the workday and say, just always talk to me. No matter what it is, just please always talk to me. Give me the opportunity to try, you know, because
Yeah.
that kind of thing breaks my heart when it's like a unilateral assumption that I have to, and I've had cases where people have ended relationships in my office with their parent. Now, there is a time and a place for that, but there are some times where I watch it happen all unilaterally, right? Based on issues, political stances. Um, I have had clients do it based on religious beliefs. I've had clients do it based on um, well, I had one client I can think of in recent past, was part of the LGBTQ community and made the assumption that her parents would never be able to get on board, right? And so the
Mm.
relationship dissolves right in front of my eyes without both parties present, or without both parties even being privy to the fact that the relationship's dissolving or why,
Mm. That's
right?
heartbreaking.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, because there's fear there, right? But I would venture to say what happened long before for that individual sitting in your office to feel like they wouldn't be supported. And this is what you and I talk about all the time. These issues, these things start younger. When your 4-year-old was trying to talk to you and you shut them down and didn't want to hear it, and then you're pissed that at 18, 19, 20, 40, they're not talking to you. It started when they were little, right? Um, and I do think we're given opportunities, like, people complain about the teenage years, which I think is hard. It's hormonal. There's a lot of social stuff. Your kid is flexing their independence and pushing back a lot. But if you can look at it just for the developmental milestone that it is, right? And you can think of that as, this is like a little bit of a training ground, right? And preparation for those other milestones later. So that person who's like, my parents will never accept me for being this, that, or the other, right? What conversations did you have before then? How did you make that assumption that they wouldn't love you no matter what, right? There's a lot that I think leads up to moments like that. That's not just like they disagreed with me once and so now I cut them off because they'll never accept me. There had to be enough moments where they felt unaccepted, or things are done on condition. We love you as long as you are the things that you want, that we want you to be. And I think that's where we have to do the work as parents, because yeah, there are certain paths in life that my children could take that would make me cringe, right? Like, if you chose a life of crime, I would have a really hard time with that because that is not how I raised you, right? But I also have to separate. And I think this is the struggle. We invest so much time, energy. They're literally part of our DNA. And then we're expected to separate and say, but you're your own person and you do you. That is exactly what happens. And I think we have to find a healthy separation of our children. Our children at some point make choices that are not necessarily a reflection of our values, of how we raised them, or of our parenting, because they have free will and they can make decisions. And sometimes they make not so great ones, right? But I think if we can separate our expectations of, my kid is going to be this when they're an adult. They're going to be a doctor. They can go, college, and they're going to do all these things. They're going to live down the street from me. Like, we curate this fantasy, right, of what kind of person we want, because we fill in the blanks. That's fine. But we have to hold space for the fact that they're probably not going to be those things. And how do you love your child if they take a path different than the one that you want? And how do you communicate with them your acceptance of their desire to make their own decisions, whether or not you think they're positive or negative? Because you
Yeah.
have the outliers, like like a murderer. Like, I think about some of these news headlines. I'm like, oh my God, what is the parent thinking? Like, they must be like mortified. But that's not the norm, right? Like, the norm is more of you know, other lifestyle choices that you may not agree on. They marry someone you didn't think was that great, whatever, right? But how do we support them in that and stay connected?
I love that you brought up the spouse part, because I think that's also, that's a huge wild card, right? I mean, because what we've talked about so far is kind of stuff that we can have even in like a tiny iota of control over, right? Like you said, like listening to the 4-year-old when they're talking to you. celebrating independence and being open-minded, being unconditionally accepting and praising of our children's ability to make their own decisions and who they are in the world, and inviting them to come and be with us in relationship regardless of who they are or how they are, what decisions they make, right? Those are all things that kind of like one-on-one we can try to cultivate with our children. And then enter spouse,
Mm.
right? And let's imagine that one takes a spouse that's very, very strong personality.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, I've seen this a lot. I've seen it where people or the spouse is older, perhaps, and much more opinionated, as he or she should be, right? Let's imagine, so I can think of a client who was in her early 20s who married a man in his, I want to say, mid to late 30s, right? And he knew who he was and what he believed in and how he wanted to run his life. And he'd been on the planet for a while and had, kind of knew he wanted to do things. And so
Mm-hmm.
she took his way, and a lot of his way was very different from the way she was raised, and it almost like fast tracked everything, right? So instead of, say, like watching your child grow up and say, oh, you know what, I think I want to do it this way, like, okay honey, like, let's do it that way. Or what do you want to have Thanksgiving dinner on the terrace of the vineyard in France? Sounds good to me, right? We don't have to have the turkey around the grandma's kitchen table, but then we enter a whole other adult, right? And again, it doesn't have to be age, it could be personality, it could be I've seen it experiences too, or seen situations where someone takes a spouse who is really, really firmly entrenched in their own family of origin, right?
Yeah.
So then it kind of becomes like, ooh, which family of origin are we going to be like, right? Or are we going to choose to align with, especially if they're very different ways of being? Kind of which way
Mm.
are we going to adopt as our way of being? Right. And
Yeah.
again, it seems to come down to things like religion, values, um, and sometimes that can be divisive,
Yeah,
right?
100%. You have to think about, yes, I agree. And that makes it very complicated. And there are clearly big barriers at that point, right? But I think you have to sit with, do the details matter to me or does this relationship matter to me?
Mhm.
Right. And again, you can only control what's on your side of the street. So you cannot control the other person, right? If your child is setting a boundary with you around your relationship and reducing contact or whatever, like there's not a lot you can have a conversation about it, but right, there's not a lot you can do to change it if they choose not to. But I think it's sitting with, okay, circumstances the way they are, how do I keep this person in my life? How do I stay connected?
Mhm.
Maybe it is we don't discuss certain things. Maybe it is I do not like your partner and all they stand for, but I'm going to keep my mouth shut about it because they're important to you. And out of that sheer fact alone, I will support you. Right? It's a lot of work.
Oh my gosh.
But I think is the relationship important to me, or am I going to let the fact that like you married someone I don't like or moved to a state I didn't approve of or whatever stuff people fight about? Because there's a lot of these things, right? I have two choices. I can throw a temper tantrum and I can make things difficult for you and you will then push me away and we will lose contact. Or I can say, I hate most of this. I am not happy. I wish it were different. However, I want you in my life and I'm willing to accept all of this because I choose the relationship. And I don't think that's easy to do, but I
Neither.
think that's the choice we make.
Yeah. I don't think either's easy, right? It's not easy to lose your child, and it's not easy to um stay in a relationship, right? When you're, maybe, let's imagine, constantly witnessing the expression of values
Mm,
that really are different from what you believe. And
yeah.
then we add grandchildren, right? Like, your child has children and they're being taught and raised with values that are like, my God, right? Like that, like you said, flies all over everything that I represent, everything that I believe in, everything for me, right? My personal knowing to be true.
Mm,
And I'm going to sit here and love you through it all.
yeah,
Ouch. So
yeah,
rude.
yeah. Well, and I think the other antidote to that is to do the same thing that your adult child's doing. What are they doing? They're exploring their interests, their life, they're filling their space, right? They're living their lives. And I think again, we get really focused on our kids and everything that that involves, and it keeps you really busy for a lot of years. But I think it's taking that opportunity of your child at, becoming an adult for you to also embrace your life as an older adult, right? As an adult with no children again. Because I think the more we can fill ourselves up, the less preoccupied we feel and the less threatened maybe we feel by the space.
Mhm.
Because I don't know, are we really losing things? Is it really a loss or is it just a transformation that we're struggling with? Right? And what we feel is a void. But if we can focus on building our lives in the same way as our adult children are building theirs, right? Then maybe we don't feel that emptiness the same way.
Yeah.
And then we can find, more joy in that connection, even if it doesn't look like what we want it to look like.
Mhm.
And I think we also have to let go of expectations that our kids will live the life that we have imagined for them. And we're all guilty of it. We all held that baby and had like a whole scene play out and we don't know if they're going to take that path, and they may not, and they'll probably be okay and lovely humans no matter what path they choose, right? But if we can let go of the picture we painted and allow them to kind of paint their own picture,
Well, and also of our lives, this kind of what chapter is it? Jane Fonda. You know, Jane Fonda wrote that book. I didn't read it. Sorry, Jane. About the chapters, she kind of talked about her life in chapters, right? What is the chapter where we envision as we're grandparents, right? Where the big Thanksgiving dinners with everybody, cooking together in the kitchen, right? These warm Christmas memories of the grandkids opening the train set that goes around the room with the twinkle lights and the music in the background and the eggnog, right? Like, because that shit may never happen either, man.
yeah.
Like, it may never happen. What if my kid ends up being like the next Jane Goodall and goes to live in the jungle and studies gorillas? Like I mean, literally, like, yeah, so there's letting go, right, of the expectation or hopes for our children, but also for ourselves.
Mm,
Your stages too, because I might want to be a grandma. My kid might say no,
I don't
right?
care.
So
Yeah.
sorry. And that's not anything I can control, right? Which is that's another huge layer we haven't even talked about yet, right? It's this idea that, if we think of kind of being the captain of our own ships, right? And what can we do to create to live our best lives, right? And create the lives that we want to live, right? This is also a gradual, not only is it, either transition or loss, we can split those hairs, but it's a gradual, very profound losing of control, right?
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
our own destiny, of our own, the way we want our lives to look.
Yeah, because it overlaps.
Right.
It overlaps. Like your kid's life impacts your life. Their choices impact you 100%, you know, um, and it may impact you in a way you did not want or intend. Right. Your child says, I don't want children. Well, if you had hopes of grandbabies, that's
Right.
their right to choose though. Right.
Right.
And yeah, and I think there's a lot of mini struggles like that. I think some are small issues, some are larger issues, right?
And that's what we see at the weddings, right? The weddings and the births. It's like, oh, well, I had always envisioned,
Yeah.
you know, buying this dress for you and you just eloped. Or I had always envisioned holding your hand as you gave birth and you told me I couldn't come, right? Or I had always envisioned my dress at the wedding, right? Or the first dance with, the father daughter dance. And like, you're Jane Goodall in the woods studying gorillas instead, you know? And so these pieces of like the things that we had wanted for ourselves that we can't choose, right? Our
Yeah.
kids get to choose that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, well, and I think that's hard, right? Like it's a lot of letting go of the things you held on to make it through your parenting journey. Right. And yeah, I do. I think it is a struggle. And I think the way to approach it is just to be aware of the struggle.
Mhm.
Like find your people, find a support network, friends, like, right? I mean, I think it's just, and being honest about it. You know what? This sucks. I don't like this. I don't like that they're independent. That's my baby, And I think recognizing you can hold two opposing ideas. You can hold this like, but they're my baby and will always be my baby. But they're an adult and they get to choose. Both things can be true. Um, I don't think there's a easy way to get there, but I think it's awareness, it's self-awareness. It's recognizing where you impose your own stuff onto somebody else and when you have to let go. And hopefully communicating, right, with your child, with your parent, if that's something that, you guys were able to do. And if not, I guess there's always therapy, right? So you're not having a one-sided conversation in your therapist's office, but you're having a session together to work it out.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And we go back. What is our advice? Therapy.
Well, I mean, only if you can't get there, right? If you can't navigate it on your
yourself. That's right. That's right.
Yeah. I think everyone will hit like bumps in the road, but it's a matter of, can you navigate them, or are those bumps turning into like relationship ending hurdles, right? And that's, I think, a lot of people will have rocky moments but get through, and then some people struggle. Yeah. And then we'll redo this podcast in like 15 years and let you know how it went. Just kidding.
Oh, I know. Okay,
We're gonna be like, eat our words.
26. Ansley will be 26 and Kinsey will be 23. No.
24. 24.
24.
We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
We will see. Lord willing and the creek don't rise, as my daddy used to say.
Yeah.
If I'm going to 15 years.
Yeah. I mean, I think so much of it is just recognizing that like you did as much as you could and it's up to them. And also recognizing those tough moments are not necessarily permanent.
Mm-hmm.
People ebb and flow in and out of relationships, in and out of beliefs, in and out of, you know what I mean? Like we keep learning, we keep growing. So, you hate your, kid's partner. They may or may not get married. It may end. It may work itself out, right? Like you just don't, it's a lot of riding the waves of just waiting and seeing and trying to be, a constant presence as they navigate, and I think starting, I guess, in adolescence, thinking about how do I impart my wisdom and still remain supportive and not critical? Because I do think a lot starts there and how we navigate that.
I mean, I feel like I've been navigating that for about 10 years already.
Yeah.
My little feisty, fiery, independent one whose first phrase was, I got this, right? Okay. Can I tell you something?
Yeah, well, I'm one of those too. And yes, no, yeah, it's true. I'm not. But, I mean, right, you look at that and it's like, you know what? Those kiddos are going to do it their way. And maybe we get practice in accepting that, because whether I like it or not, she's going to do it her way. And I just have to watch her crash and burn if she does it the wrong way. And that'll be a lesson. I was that kid too, right? I was the kid who's like, don't touch the stove, it's hot. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I told you it was hot. No, I needed to see for myself. You know what I mean? Like I needed to experience hot. I don't comprehend what you mean when you say don't touch that. that trait in me has never gone away. I still do it to my husband. He's like, I don't think that's going to work. I'm like, I'm going to try. And then I'm like, it didn't work. He's like, but I have to execute first. Right. And you know, some of our kids are going to be that way too, where what you say isn't going to matter. They just have to make those decisions and experience it themselves. And in the end, it's their life to experience, you know, and I think we have to tame our desire to protect them from everything and recognize like they have to engage and learn the same way we did. Yeah. So again, no solutions, just some ideas.
Suggestions. That's right.
Yeah.
And we're on the same bus. I mean, you know, we have not come on the other side and done everything perfectly. We are just anticipating and watching and listening, and you know, seeing this both as parents, but also therapists, right? Who work with people who are children to someone and many who are parents to others. And that sandwich generation, right? Where you and I, Claudia, we have children of our own. We have parents, and our parents are older and, you know, struggling with different things as people do as they age, right? And watching our children struggle with different things as they age, and being in that middle and just hoping that we can navigate everything the best we can.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Oh,
I know it's a lot.
well, and you know, I think we get a little bit of a different perspective because we have the opportunity to listen to people's experiences and their vulnerabilities in these moments. And not only from those, you know, adult kids struggling with their parents, but the parents struggling with their adult children and everything in between. And I think we get a little bit of insight into people's struggles that the average person doesn't, because maybe you hear a comment in passing, right? Of, oh, my parents, or oh, my daughter, right? But we get a lot more detail around that. So I do think we get, I don't know, it's a little bit of a luxury we have in our job that we get to witness a lot of people's experiences without having to experience it ourselves. And, you know, my clients teach me a lot about things that I may never experience because their experience is different. And, you know, I think that's also the struggle with this. How do you navigate it? How do you find that, you know, that good adult child parent relationship? There's no easy answer because it's so dependent on the people involved in it and the circumstances and, you know, yeah.
Well, good luck with yours.
Yeah, you too. We'll touch base in a few years and rewatch this and then have commentary. That'd be amazing, actually. I think we should do it.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Yes. Oh my gosh. I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine. In a few years, our kids will be driving.
I know. Although I'm excited for that. I cannot wait for someone else to take the little literal wheel in this house every now and then. I'm so excited.
Oh my God, you're crazy.
I'm like, let's go get that license tomorrow.
I saw some riding down the bike path on 98, which is our main road here, the other day, and I was like, so dangerous. I would never let my child do that. And then I'm thinking like, wait, they can probably drive a car right now. Those same kids who are riding their bike. And I'm like, I would never let my child ride her bike on 98. She could be driving a car. Oh my God.
I know. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, as always, if you guys have questions, comments, thank you for listening. Please feel free to leave them in the, I don't know, comments. We're going to post this on Instagram. We have this on Spotify. I don't think you can comment there. You can message us through either of our websites, Claudia's Mighty Oak Parenting.com and ClaudiaGlassman.com. And
we do have an email, Katie. We do.
Oh, we have an email?
We had it. It is, I'll tell you what it is. I should know. From our perspective at protonmail.com.
Do you check that email?
I mean, like every so often.
I'm gonna email you.
See if I check it. Yeah. So that is it. That's all for us today. I hope you all have a good rest of your day.
We'll talk to you next time.
Alrighty, bye.